tell me what's going on in their brain, because all three of them have won tremendously thousands of times in their life. Okay, one is Michael Jordan, one is Michael Phelps, and the third is Napoleon. Okay, all three, they have different process, because you said that things that we experience and things that we do, they either become procedure memory or explicit memory, and when we keep repeating it again and again, the stories in our brain again and again, it ends up becoming a very strong memory. Right? That's how we end up winning or losing in some sort. Okay, or perform that affects our ability to perform a task. Yeah? So all three people, so Michael Jordan, what he does, he would imagine in his brain throwing a basket. Right? So he says this, that everything in life happens twice. One inside your brain and then in reality. So it has already happened in your brain. So he would practice the whole match. That I'm throwing this, he would visualize it. Right? So that's one process. Second is Michael Phelps. What he used to do for years, since the time he started training till he actually ended up winning almost every race in the world. Right? Every night before sleeping, he used to see himself winning. Not the process. So Michael Jordan is looking at process. I'm getting the pass from here. I'm doing this. Phelps is only seeing himself winning. Like, this is what I've won. After winning, I've done this. Like right before winning, I'm like, this is how my water is. And he would see himself winning in different situations. Like if my water broke, like if my goggles broke and water got in, how do I win? If let's say I get stuck, if my start is late, I'm a win. It's just winning. And the third process is Napoleon. Before every big battle, he would sit down and he would imagine himself losing. That what are the ways that I can die today?
Yeah, it's a survival.
Right? And it's a thing that... So he would just see himself dying from all the ways, and that's why he will never die. Like he would win almost, because he's eliminated in his head. These are the maybe 23 ways today I'm going to die. And I won't
protect myself.
I'm going to protect from those 23. All three different ways. All three are somehow actually practicing memory in your head to end up winning. What is going on in their brains? Is it all three different things? They're activating different things or same?
Likely activating different things. The one that the first example of Michael Jordan, he's activating every single circuit of practice. Either the real practice or the created practice in his nervous system. So he's highly process driven. It's like, I'm going to remember how it feels to shoot the 3-pointer, etc. How am I going to do this over and over and over again? And clearly the love of the game is obvious in him. He has inspired multiple people to fall in love with the game as well, right? So I think that is very process oriented. Michael Phelps has also got insane bodily advantages. That span, I mean, there's a reason he was the albatross. There's the span itself. So there's a physical advantage. But it's interesting that he's imagining so it's almost like a positive reinforcement. His goal is that I want to win that race. And he's reinforcing that positivity in him over and over again, but clearly not simultaneously saying that if I don't win this, I give up. That doesn't seem to be part of the dialogue. It's, I'm going after this and I'm going to go after this no matter what the circumstance. My goggles break, something isn't working perfectly. I'm still going to give it everything I've got.
So the thought of losing doesn't occur. What is going on in his brain?
Absolutely. So in a sense, he's just ideating the outcome for himself, right? This is like, I'm convinced I'm going to do this. Largely it turned out to be correct. I mean, someone can ideate this and it may not work out because they have not done the work. It's also Michael Phelps, right? So, I mean, I could sit here and say, I also want to win the Olympics, but if I get into the pool, I will not even cross so that's, there is a realistic element to his ideation. It's not just a pipe dream. It's someone who's performing at the top of their game and then he's saying, I'm going to ideate the best outcome possible. So that's very realistically based. It's not a total pipe dream. But human beings have done this over and over again. I mean, there are examples of saying, I want to go to the moon. We wouldn't have believed we could have gone to the moon or gone to the other side of the moon and even seen anything. And we've done that, right, as a species. So clearly pushing yourself that it is possible to do what feels like the impossible is one way of motivating yourself to get to that goal. In the case of Napoleon, I think he's, based on this description, would be performing out of fear. It's a how do I survive? And those were survival circumstances. If you don't have that instinct, you are going to be dead on a battlefield, especially a battlefield unlike the ones of today and of that era. So I think that's operating out of a fear mentality. And certainly every description of him in history indicates that it was a man who would use every possible manipulative tool available to him in his arsenal to ensure that he survives.
Yeah.
Right? So it was one who was a pragmatist almost, in a sense, right? How do I not be the one who's taken out on this battlefield? It's that approach. Okay. They're very different. I don't think the first two are operating from fear. The last one, I think, is operating from fear, but is still successful despite that because of the kind of situation it's in. So, but which one is the one that gets the sustained admiration is also interesting from our species. It's also interesting, right?
No one. After 50 years, no one.
After 50 years, no one. But Napoleon is more than 50 years. So it's interesting because...
No, it's also because they had influence on writings. These guys don't have an influence on writing. So we can't...
History is always written by the winners. That's always, unfortunately, the case. History is also written by dominant voices. Culturally, it's always been written by dominant voices.
So one is operating out of process. One is operating out of ideating a situation for himself. And one is operating out of fear. Are they operating from different parts of their brain?
Likely.
What is activating in case of Michael Jordan, Michael Phelps and Napoleon?
So I would imagine that in the procedural situation, you're activating the circuits that control that action. Let's say you're imagining a 3-pointer over and over and over again. You have a sequence, a muscle sequence that gets activated. Your motor cortex gets activated, then your spinal column. Then you have to get your position of your body just right. And you've practiced it so many times that you can probably think that sequence out without doing it. And if you keep activating that and then you practice it multiple times, it is eventually when you're in that situation, it's almost automatic. It feels almost automatic. So you're actually driving probably the procedural memories I was telling you.
So is it like, is it different?
Striatum. It's this part of the brain. So there is in this, it is invisible, but there's a region here which underneath this. So like if you're now cutting through half the brain like this. Underneath this, there's a region called the striatum. The striatum and the basal ganglia circuitry are what do the procedural learning. That's a circuit that's activated in Michael Jordan's brain when he's doing that.
This.
Yeah, and that activates a cerebral cortex, premotor and motor. From the motor cortex, it goes all the way down through the spinal column, all the way to the muscles of his arms and back, eventually driving the release of the ball, right?
Okay.
So it's that sequence, and the sequence is multiple neurons connected with each other that get activated. That now you're doing it without shooting the ball, and you're doing it repeatedly over and over again. That's how eventually also you improve that circuit. So you can drive a circuit by thinking it through over and over again. And so in some sense, that's also how you memorize something. That's also how you learn something over a period of time. So you can also do it for procedural memory as well.
So just by thinking about it, he's actually getting better. Okay. And with Phelps, what is he activating?
With Phelps, he's likely activating his prefrontal cortex to override negative outcomes. So his limbic cortex will say, what the heck would happen if my goggles broke halfway through and I have water in my eyes, right? So now that's a negative outcome. He's activating probably the prefrontal cortex, which would then say, despite that negative outcome, you're going to be able to do this. So you're driving circuits in the brain that are giving you control over the responses that would happen if an emergency should happen in the water. Let's say your goggles do break. Everybody else has goggles and they're getting to their goal. You now have to function with something that has given you a handicap in that situation. How do you not let that handicap become a serious handicap? So you've ideated and imagined that handicap already before it occurs, and you've allowed yourself to say, if this were to happen, this is how I will handle it. Right? So in some sense, think about it like, let's say now let's think of a simple exam. Let's say you're going for an exam and you have an exam for which you've studied, but you're now convinced yourself you'll forget everything you've studied. And when you go into the room, everything will come out of your brain and you will not be able to write a single word because you're so nervous. How do you prepare yourself for that possibility that you tell yourself that if that was to arise, how am I going to calm myself down so that I can at least handle one or two? So if you practice this to yourself, you would say, in my entire paper, there'll be at least one question I can answer. It's a 100-mark paper. I can't answer all 100. I'll find one question I can answer. Should I feel so nervous, I will find the one question I can answer and answer it. And you've prepared yourself before that situation to tackle that. Hopefully, then you say, okay, I answered one question. Maybe the second question I'll find in my 100, which I can still answer. Even if I can answer it very well, I can answer. That should have brought your calmness in enough that it will give you some room to tackle what would have been impossible otherwise. You've been paralyzed by the hardest question and not even attempted one. So it's, in a sense, preparing yourself for the worst possible outcome, that I forgot everything. How will I handle such a situation? It's like when you go on stage and you have a fear of public speaking. And a paralytic fear of public speaking, you will never be able to get over that unless somewhere you calm yourself by saying, if I have to do this, I will look at the one friendly face in the audience that is smiling back at me, and I will talk like I'm having a conversation with that one person. Imagine the rest of the room, there's nobody. So you tell yourself what you will do should that situation arise. And I think that is Michael Phelps' strategy, which is that should something go wrong, this is how I'm going to handle it.
थंबनेल देख के आए हो ना, बिल्कुल